God, there's so many notes. There we go. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Bill. This is kind of like trying to stand where I try new things in pop culture, because I've been living under a rock. I just wanted to do a follow-up video after chronicling my series on watching Arcane for the first time, giving my thoughts as I went. I was able to just sit down and rewatch the whole season. I know what's coming now. Now I can just sit, take some notes, enjoy the show, and I noticed a lot more stuff, and I want to make a video about it. Hope you guys enjoy. If you want to check out me watching it for the first time, there's an Arcane playlist in the description. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't, ring the bell, check the settings, set them to all blah 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 YouTube words. I have a gaming channel linked in the description where I stream there twice a week, Bill Chill Gaming. My merch store is also there if you want to donate or buy some merch. You can also donate here by leaving a super thanks. And speaking of the description, there's also a link there to a card that will send you to resources for social awareness and education, mental health and crisis lines, Trevor Project resources, things like that, should you or someone you know need them. I really enjoyed Arcane, being able to watch it again. Like I said, knowing what's coming, even noticing like the Shimmer Doctor looks like, I just wrote, is that Vander? He's like experimenting on a body. Didn't see that because I was too busy panicking and screaming and then being in awe of the finale. I don't think anybody's going to be able to ever notice every little thing, every little frame. But if there's something that I missed, let me know in the comments section, especially playing with time like we do with that time skip. It's a lot of filling in the blanks, which is really cool to do on the rewatch. But I feel like the expectation was very high for me to notice everything on my first go. I don't think anyone's ever going to really notice everything, but I will do my best. I kind of realized on the rewatch how the enforcers kind of play both a law enforcement and a military presence at the same time. The full scary masks, the body armor. It was interesting kind of going all the way back to the beginning and going, oh yeah, these are the same people who wear skirts and tight pants that monitor the parade. It was really interesting seeing that and kind of reliving the beginning, because you never see much about the first conflict that led us to this world. And it was interesting watching it again and seeing Vi as a child take in everything while Powder has her eyes covered at certain points. And it makes me wonder, what were things leading up to even the very first scene that Vi saw that Powder didn't? And already it introduces you the concept of how the same instance, the same event can leave different impacts on people. After noting, especially in the third act, punch first, gee, where did I learn that from? That exchange Echo and Vi have later. The first thing Vi sees of Vander is punching an enforcer, and now they get a sense of a lot of pain, but there's like a sense of safety there. With all the gaps there are in information in this moment, you can pinpoint the exact first time Vi sees literal punching as something that made her feel safe or safer. And then I actually watched the full opening credits sequence, because when I'm like watching things, like I skip it to save time, also copyright on the song. The opening credits spoil everything. So I guess my first tip when introducing someone to Arcane is maybe skip the opening credits. You're gonna get the Imagine Dragons song later in the show anyway. Because I was watching it and I'm like, oh, there's Jayce with the hammer, there's Vi with the gauntlets. I like a lot of the visuals, especially the one of Vander protecting Vi and Powder, while Silco's shadow is even bigger, and it's like you kind of see the futility in him shielding them. I like those visuals. It's a great intro, but dang, if someone's going in not knowing anything about this world or this lore, I would skip the intro. It also had a big response from me seeing the bright colors for the first time in a long time again as we're doing that initial heist, and Milo and Clagger are okay. It's this feeling of like, the world is our oyster, we got this. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, oh yeah, there used to be a lot of vibrant colors, and they weren't striking the contrast of the dark, grim world we find ourselves in by the end. It made me weirdly nostalgic to just see nice colors and a sandwich. You could still really feel that energy of, oh, we're never gonna get to see Milo master lockpicking or see more of Clagger, who they grow up to be. It just adds a lot to the tragedy to watch it all over again, and it's like, haha, that's a nose trimmer. Which foreshadows Powder's intelligence, that she recognized the nose trimmer right away. At first it feels like, haha, Milo's silly dumb. No, Powder's silly smart. I also started noticing little things, the coulda, woulda, shouldas, like you would do reflecting back on life. Milo's picking the lockpick, Vi gets impatient and uses brute force to knock open the door, and I'm like, oh, that cost him experience points and a session of practicing lockpicking, which would really come in handy later. There's no way anyone could have seen that, but but that's part of Vi's arc, a little seed of that arc planted early on. Those impacts that hit that are so indirect, it's like a butterfly effect kind of feeling. I love seeing that. I hated seeing the music box again, even though I love sparklers. Echo being the one to overhear when Jayce buys this stuff. It's like, wow, you really kind of see how there's a million little dominoes in the grand scheme of things. All these kids are obviously blameless. They were children when this initial conflict happened, and it definitely was building up before that. So this is just the life that they're in. You can see like a fraction of a percent of blame for everything being spread around to everybody. Milo mouthing off, and it gets them into that fight with Pee-Pee Knife, who I guess did die. There's just another guy who looks like him, and it's kind of a bummer because the way that he's so like spaced out at times and licking someone's head, I thought that was like after effects of overloading him with Shimmer, the original strain that made him Hulk out. Hulk Vander just kind of bops him on the head, and I just assumed he would recover from that. It's magic, who's to say? Milo mouthing off got them in that fist fight. You know, Powder took the stones. Vi didn't tell Vander about the stones. Usually when reflecting on a story, you can see those big choices that set you on the path, and this really helped me consider all those little choices or indirect choices. It's haunting. It's very eerie. Also seeing Vi, every time that they're roasting Powder for being a Jinx, she kind of brushes it off. There's no group discussion. That conversation of calling out Milo, maybe Powder should have been there for that. You have that really frustrating element of misunderstanding because she stepped away from the conversation when she overheard it, but that's like the least of the focus points, which I really like looking back. I would really hate it if it was just, oh, Powder didn't hear the whole conversation and then she was mad and now she's Jinx. Meh. No, it's so much more than that. But seeing those little failures as a leader, things that you wouldn't always consider, you know, because she separately tells Milo, shut up, you suck too, and then separately tells Powder, see all these other mistakes we've made in our childhood? You learn, you grow, everybody screws up. Beautiful moment. Also made me realize nobody's cleaned up the butt splotch in the paint, the boards that a kid tripped on, millions of proverbial potholes in the street. It's also interesting seeing Savika's disloyalty to Vander when she sees him as soft and fed up, but then she won't do that to Silco. And it's such a subtle, interesting little character arc to see her loyalty be so diminished in the beginning and then strong almost to a fault by the end. I never really understood what would have made that shift other than being older, wiser, time has gone by, but it was interesting seeing her be so against Vander and then seeing those same things repeated in Silco and she still has his back. I also got a lot of chance to appreciate the subtleties of Savika. Also, she has like this Hydra kind of feel to her where you cut off her arm, it comes back stronger because now it's got the big swooshy sword thing. Kind of feels like a metaphor for the kind of bearing of extra arms, Hextech versus Shimmer in the society of it all. It's just how I feel. I think it would have worked better to parallel the Vander Silco betrayal that's so physical and almost drowning him in the water than if Powder and Vi's conflict and falling out had stayed so emotional, psychological. I think it would have been a great way to reflect, and it still does this, but a great way to reflect how sometimes those scars can be internal. It's just there was also a physical contact. I don't know. Again, that is just me. You can't unbully me, neither can I. I love the through line starting of Vi's responsibility and also that feeling of how it's not fair that she just happens to be older, but that's kind of the point of responsibility. You know, she still chooses to take the mantle of leader. She still chooses to go on these heists. She still chooses to bring people with her. When they go to save Vander, she doesn't stop anybody except for Powder from going with. If Powder was involved in some way, played lookout, told her to watch the bar, you know, send the signal if something happens, like you have a job too. Maybe she wouldn't have left her post. Silco wanted to weave the lie of Vander leaving with all of his kids. If Powder had been left behind, people would have been like, wait, Silco bad. So it's just little things like that, and nobody could see that coming, and that's where that unfairness comes back into play, is that like huge amount of hindsight that no one person could possibly have. And I like how much that makes me just stressed and itchy all over. It makes it feel real. Every single beat had consequences. Echo didn't even get the whole story. He was just overhearing things. Benzo, who was taking care of Echo, he kept pushing Echo out of the room. So Echo's also working with a barrier, listening through walls, partial information, and it's kind of tied into the unfair responsibility that Vi or any of these kids have at this age in this awful environment. That half measure of earn your keep, be an adult, that mentality, but then still sheltering them from reality, from all the information, pushing them out of the room when the grown-ups are speaking. They're operating in this world that pulls no punches while their guardians, their parents, their parent figures are withholding and shielding them from all the information. So they're playing a rigged game with a third of a deck of cards. Because when you're watching it the first time, you're getting all this information in pieces as an audience member too. You don't get the full picture. They don't get the full picture. They're making choices. You're rooting for it. You're against it. You're worried for them. You're confident they'll succeed. It keeps you right in that seat for the initial roller coaster ride when you don't know those twists and turns. But then knowing them, everything changes. It becomes like almost a completely different show watching this a second time, knowing the full story. I do wish we had gotten some scenes of like Echo looking up to Vi more, because it's mentioned. Vi's been teaching me how to punch, referencing I used to clean you up when you were covered in grease from the junkyard. It's hard to say because it's animation, and like I get that that's like so hard to, we need to add a scene. So it's not a complaint that I feel like has any sort of construction to it. I just still want those things, and especially with this animation style, I'd love to see, what the junkyard looks like in the background. I want some visuals with that because the animation's so pretty, but also that it's not like you can just, hold on guys. A constructive one I do have, I wish we'd gotten more young Caitlyn in Act 1. Give me the Caitlyn timeline at the same time as everyone else, because we didn't get a lot of young Caitlyn, and I completely forgot first time watching this that she's the one holding the box with Jayce, and I kind of wish we'd gotten some more of that. Give me the young Caitlyn scene with Grayson earlier, and then remind us of that when she's the gravestone, right? The statue, the bust. I love feeling that Grayson is Vander and Marcus is a variant of what Vi could be, being aggressive, scare tactics, setting the bar on fire. Like Vi gets trapped by Silco, Marcus gets betrayed by Silco. Both of them are way in over their heads. They kind of go against the wishes of their mentor. And like seeing how Grayson kind of like continues to downplay what Marcus is doing, go cool off, like not taking that time to like introduce him to what's going on, because Marcus is like, what are we doing? And he doesn't like any of it, and then he makes things worse on his own. People, much like these materials and technology, are at a crossroads, and they're still being molded, still trying to be figured out. And then seeing that first clash of Shimmer versus Hextech, the Shimmer Hulk monsters versus an explosion of a stone that nobody knows what's going on. All these failures with her gadgetry is what causes Powder and her insecurities to pour extra stones into the little monkey boy, I think. I think it's the extra stones in my mind that fell into the room that hurt Milo and Clagger and did all that damage. Hex gates could have been used for emergency situations, and it was used for shipping. Jinx needed medical attention. If only there was a way that we could teleport people. They allude to having healthcare, but we don't really see a hospital, but it's there. Heimerdinger references it when Echo sprains his ankle. The hex gates could have also been used to create emergency evacuation. It could have also been used to unify the two sides of this conflict more. So if they want to talk to Silco about something, shoom, it could have been utilized in so many other ways than just shipping. I also forgot that Jayce was hiding this, which is why it got stolen. There's so many little factors at play here that just line up the world's worst domino effect. If he had been allowed to do it at the school, there would have been more security, which then kind of plays into Heimerdinger's whole, you need to do everything safely. Yes, he's right. He also kind of facilitated this in a way by keeping it so forbidden. And it was kind of interesting to kind of sit there and realize, oh yeah, you shouldn't have even been doing this in your house. And he didn't even have a permit. Because Heimerdinger is the most frustrating character. Because like, yeah, safety, but also, I don't know, dealing in that absolute of no, never, still created an opportunity for someone to do it without anything from safety goggles to other people around to a secure facility. He's very responsible for a lot of things. I love watching Mel, knowing now what I know about her upbringing and her family and where she's from. You can tell throughout this whole thing, we need to put Piltover on the map. The marvel of this new technology. Let's get him investors. Let's put him on the council. Let's kick out Heimerdinger, or going along with it rather. Manipulating the other council members with presence. It's so interesting to see all that again, knowing that that's kind of how she was raised to operate, and she still sees herself as the kinder, more merciful path than what she's seen in her mom. I love seeing the use of lighting, especially with scenes with Mel. Like, it's very dark at times. She's silhouetted a lot. When she's talking to Jayce over his shoulder and there's like the red glows of the fire and the shadows over part of their faces, it's very sinister. And then you see the revelations start to hit with lighting later on, especially when her mom comes back. When Mel dreams about her mom's face is covered in shadow. She wakes up in the middle of the night and there's just this faint illumination from like the moonlight, and you can see the light starting to hit her as she's realizing, my tactics are different and more merciful. Sure, I'm not that different from my mom. I'm doing what she's wanted all along. I love seeing that turn, having that lens of, this is more peaceful, this is more merciful. Play the quiet game. It's like her mom is a broadsword and she's a poisoned like needle, and then realizing, I am also a weapon. Like, this is also bad. I talked about it in Act 3, as she's one of the antagonists of the story who's, sticking to the status quo, not really instilling change, just changing the council just enough to where everybody can be more indulgent and profitable. Big buildings and hex tech and fancy technology will be the thing that shows their power. Seeing all those moves and taking it now from the lens of, it's better than punching my way to the top or slicing my way through the top, I guess. It's so interesting watching her operate with that information. Seeing her mom rip apart the lobsters, and it's so cool seeing how different they are. Then seeing that huge parallel between Mel's mom abandoning Mel because she's making her soft, and then seeing Silco and Vander keep their daughters so close that it hinders their goals. One could also argue that abandonment could feed into why she stands by Jayce when Jayce is going too far, and she's like, I'm gonna do things different than you and that will be better, and then realizing just because it's different doesn't mean it's better. I love that. It's still so frustrating and itchy to see we should loosen security, not for public safety, but so that way these two guys can have their illegal wine or whatever. And wasn't this for safety? Nobody cares about safety. And seeing where her mind is at now after the revelations of Act 3 when Mel's mom shows up, it's so fascinating to watch her operate that way. It's also so heartbreaking to see Jayce and Victor literally save each other's lives, metaphorically and directly each other's second chances. In the effort of pursuing greatness, we failed to do good. I never really considered it until watching those scenes a second time that they threw each other's and their own second chances away. And it's heartbreaking. Victor's story is definitely one that changes the more I watch it. Again, Heimerdinger was right. You need to be safer with this. This needs patience. This needs more time, but also he's naive. He's talking to someone who not only would traditionally live fraction of his lifespan, but even less of that because he's sick. It fuels that desire, that desperation. Also the frustration that he feels, not only the situation, there's always a choice to diffuse, but he's also on very limited time and just wasted a big chunk of what little time he has left making hex gates for shipping needs instead of solving a real issue, whether it's his own or someone else's. When they finally crack the code on the stone, they use Victor's cane, his crutch, to barricade the door. And I'm like, the extra measures we do to double lock the door that then we don't think about later. And it had consequences because of the time taken from him. Doing what Heimerdinger suggests actually fueled more desperation. Heimerdinger is saying we have all the time in the world, yet he wastes his own time going to the opera instead of doing what he eventually does anyway, which is going to see Echo, seeing that tree, understanding the world. He didn't even understand the air pressure differences because their air quality is different. He wasted his own time too. He's right and also naive and hypocritical. Vander died saying protect the family, protect Powder to Vi, and then his ghost and memory, work on your guard, she needs you. It just indirectly opens so much more perspective to remind Vi to look after and take care of herself, to be able to help yourself so you can help others. I kind of like how that shifts between his final words and his ghost's words. Interesting how Marcus didn't turn himself in. Yep. I don't know. It's interesting seeing him speak at funerals, have a kid. This is where his life is at. And it's kind of like, yeah, man, you should be thinking about the future before you have children who now their life is the future you won't see. You know, it's kind of that you were being selfish until you finally had to think about somebody else. I like that concept. It doesn't make me root for him. He's still the guy who like set fire to the bar and, you know, double crossed everybody and facilitated Silco, covered stuff up. The enforcers don't question him, nothing. They don't really have personalities or even faces, especially when they're in the lanes. Their masks are on. They almost look like stormtroopers from Star Wars. I also noticed that when Vi is in the right when she's fighting, she remembers to block and counter like she does on the bridge against all of Silco's boys. Also, Vander's gloves could have broken that wall. Easier said when I'm sitting on my couch, not in a desperate moment. And again, Milo took longer to pick that lock because he had even less experience when they were doing the heist the other day. Everyone's doing what they can, and it just feels like everybody was just kind of set up to fail. If we had worked on our teamwork, if Vi didn't insist on having the punchy gloves, Clagger could have had them, but how could you have seen that coming? It's so frustrating. If the Atlas gauntlets had existed at the time, the technology was better, that fight would have been 100% Vi's. Those gloves would have really come in handy in Act 1. I still love the beautiful, oh fun, this is cute, we're floating, while Powder is falling with style. The trajectory of a downward ramification of an explosion, I don't know. It's one of my favorite things of the show to see how Jinx or Powder, with the right facilities, the right equipment, the right environment, there's a world where Powder or Jinx could have cracked the code and helped a lot of people. When Powder's being taken in by Silco, her eye glows like it's already got shimmer in it. It's a little unnerving. First, it just was a cool color. Now it means something. Thanks, Arcane. The irony of the Progress Day Parade is even spicier, all things considered. Also, I'm really bummed that it's Piltover Progress Day and nobody's called it PP Day. Seeing the butterflies again, knowing what they'll become later, and seeing how that just devastates Jayce again, like, ooh, pretty Hex-Tech butterfly. In the wrong hands, it becomes a firework, which becomes an explosion in even wronger hands than that. It's kind of brutal realizing Jayce and Victor never had control over Hex-Tech. Heimerdinger's hypocrisy really brings them a lot of cause to cling to Mel's way of doing things, and it doesn't make Mel's way the right way by any means. I could see how much more enticing that path is when Heimerdinger is still being so obstinate. After getting the which chair do I sit in scene, it really does like hit a whole other layer to see how she just reflects what other people see in her, how they treat her in the moment. Sevika tries to intimidate her, so she becomes intimidating and threatening because Sevika sees her as a threat. She's more childish with Silco, and she doesn't know how to be with Vi. When she's around Vi, she lets Powder back in, and then that brings in all those traumas associated with Powder, and then that gets projected onto Caitlyn, activating the flares when she thinks of Milo and Clagger, and like that visual is still, oh man. It's interesting to see Silco neglect Jinx the same way that Heimerdinger's kind of neglecting Piltover and the Undercity. He's constantly feeling the fires of her traumas and her PTSD. Every time it manifests again, it hinders Silco's plans. Ultimately, that's his undoing. Jinx is convinced that Silco is, lying to him, which he is, but also is convinced he's going to turn her in, which he's not. But she doesn't trust him anymore because all he's done is teach her not to trust people in an effort to convey we're all we've got. Because of that, now she has everything to lose if he does betray her, and it sends her on that spiraling trajectory. Not enough gay, but if you cut the brothel scene for time, you lose 90% of the queer stuff. Yeah, we could have used a little more gay. There can always be a little more queer representation. It's interesting to see how Mel pushed Jayce into the deep end. Now he's even more over his head as a new council member. Because I always forget that, Act 2 kind of happens over, a weekend. So he's only been a counselor for so long. I appreciate seeing the soft spot she has for Jayce when he opens up to her about Victor and about betraying Heimerdinger. I wish I kind of got more of a feel for their relationship. Because, I don't know, it always felt like she was focusing on utilizing Hex-Tech. If it is a romantic relationship by the end, it's still a romantic relationship with a manipulative foundation. It's kind of hard for me to track. It's interesting seeing while we have Mel trying so hard not to be her mom, we then see Silco insisting that Jinx is like him. The baptism in the evil water, everyone will betray us, Vander is trash. Caitlyn, I think, is the primest example of being her own person, doing her own thing. Because of that, she leans too hard into wanting to be a detective, trusting Marcus so blindly, not seeing the corruption in the enforcers. Because end of the day, like, she expected Echo to just hand over the stone to Marcus as opposed to waiting until they find Jayce, the council member who she's known most of her life. It's that unfair reality that gets kind of set in here. And I feel like that's something that's kind of easy to overlook. Not only does everything matter because these are our characters and this is the story that we're watching, but everything that they do matters because they're all in positions of power or adjacent to positions of power. Vi needs to have better patience, better guard, better judgment. She can't keep running in and acting with her fists alone. If she had waited when she found Savika, she would have noticed or been prepared for the robot arm. It still looks like a tail when it's under her cloak. And then refusing to listen to she's like his daughter, but that's a hard thing to take in. Still believing that Jinx isn't working for Silco, she's trapped by Silco. You can always see those like personal conflicts come in and sometimes they're pushed aside. You can always feel it though. Like I love when Jayce confides in Mel, you can see flickers of light. And again, I love how the lighting plays so much of a story into Mel's headspace. It's like reflecting off of her like the gold that's on her shoulders and everything. Those like glimpses of light kick in as she's, you know, being vulnerable with Jayce, or the dream that she's having about her mom, or the revelations she's having, or the shady dealings that she's doing being in the dark. I loved kind of connecting the lighting to Mel's headspace and revelations, and then connecting that to light being reflective on metal, on gold, how that kind of wraps up Mel's headspace throughout the show and how it's illustrated. It's so cool. Silco, whether he knows it or not, if Silco was holding Jinx accountable, trying to help Jinx, being mindful of her abandonment issues wouldn't be festering to where she needs to go off and do her own thing to appease him or show value or worth. She's gonna run off and steal the stones and create a bigger, louder conflict. She left a calling card several times. She's leaving a trail. They're following that trail back to Silco. It's the undoing of everything. Again, doesn't excuse what anybody did, Savika, Jinx, or anybody, but it's just one of those things I kind of noticed where it's like, just like Vi's lacking leadership at times, Silco wasn't managing his team properly, and it blew up in everybody's face. And then when Vi finds Jinx or finds powder, all she sees is powder, and the reality is that's not powder. We can't go back. We can't undo the things we've done. It's kind of like chasing a ghost. Even Jinx is sitting there like, we'll just bring powder back, act like none of this happened. But you can't ignore Jinx if you want to help her. You need to embrace every part of her. It's so interesting seeing Echo's relationship to everything that's happened. He's right. Jinx is choosing to be with Silco in a sense, but also she has to. She doesn't see any other way. It's interesting seeing people operate with pieces of the narrative. Again, very human. We're not always going to know and see everything. We have a huge benefit as the audience. And then when push comes to shove and it's time for the greatest scene in the whole show, when the two of them are fighting, then the definitive action of Echo jumping forward. I love seeing him cut through the fog and the gray and the uncertainty and the darkness, making a decision, and then here he is. He wins and he can't go through with it. There's that hesitation there, and then seeing how Jinx will just destroy everything. I love seeing the respect as that battle between Echo and Jinx kind of becomes the respectable. There's something about that shift. It's not a brawl, it's a duel. I'm still very confused on how he got away with that with just a sprained ankle. I still love that scene. It's so beautiful. I like seeing all the beautiful colors, and Dynasties and Dystopia is loud, and it goes so hard. And then click, gray, quiet, it's brutal, it's painful. It kind of like regrounds everything. There's something about watching that, and like it happens a couple times. It happens again with Vi and Jayce taking down the Shimmer facility, and it's like, oh cool, like steampunk sci-fi bright color battles and punching the bad guys in the spooky suits and using the hammer gun and using the hammer shield. Then it gets grounded back in reality so fast, like just enough time for you to be like, this is exciting, this is so like, oh, the adrenaline, oh, the visuals, the colors, the action, oh. I love how it takes you on those whiplashy whirlwind moments, the roller coaster ride of it all. I still don't really know how to take in the Shimmer surgery. Definitely reads as like that archaic, awful, not a lobotomy, but something of that extreme nature. It seems to do something to your body, and it seems like an amplifier. It also seemed to amplify Jinx's resentment for Caitlyn and Vi. The headspace that Jinx is in seemed to kind of amplify those things, just like how it amplifies your body's ability to heal itself. Everything that Mel's mom does is so foreboding, because I was just kind of sitting there thinking, and I'm like, why don't you just tell your mom to leave? And why didn't I think that in the moment either? And it's like, yeah, we can also be very subservient to our parents, even if they've been awful to us. I felt it more the second time when I'm like, no, get her out, get her out. She scares me. I do wish we had gotten it sooner. I love that reveal so much, though. And as we see Mel start to learn that lesson, we see Vi neglect her lessons. You know, she teams up with Jayce. What's the plan? Let's go. It seems like she's just doing another version of the heist that set all of this into motion at the beginning. It's hard to see Vi still be so angry that she's neglecting the full picture. Take down the facility and people will turn on Silco. Little does she know, Silco losing his position of power means that they're also all going to turn on Jinx, because she won't take in the she's like his daughter, because she knows that she has the stone, but neglecting that she's the one who has to pay for this if you remove Silco from the picture. You can see the bigger picture, but you can also see how she's just pushing through to just her portion of the picture. And again, still very human. Just like the uncertainty that Jinx has and misunderstanding Silco when he's at Vander's statue, is there anything so undoing as a daughter? It does kind of sound like he's about to turn her in. We're kind of left in that uncertainty with Jinx, and just like how we get into that headspace with Vi as we're presented with the evil cupcake platter, where we're there with our characters. I like how we've hit this climax and there's still so much uncertainty and volatility to everything. I love it so much. It's so damn stressful, though. That dinner scene is impeccable. The dealing in absolutes and how there is no one or the other. We can't go back to being Powder. Staying as Jinx is a bad idea. Neither decision happens in those absolutes either, because we can't operate that way. That's not how things work. Somehow we end this with still choosing Jinx because Silco is gone. Nobody chose that. It was a reflex. Silco couldn't even let Jinx go, just like how Vi can't let go of Powder. I still kind of can't believe that he didn't go, yeah, leave. That way we don't have to turn you in and you're safe from the enforcers. He still selfishly wants Jinx with him, just like how Vi selfishly just wants the part of her that's Powder back. There's no room for her to become a new person. She's stuck in this absolute. It's so fascinating. I love that scene because everybody is tied down physically except for Jinx, and yet Jinx has relinquished all control. Everyone else is immobilized, and she still doesn't get a say and relinquishes control and doesn't have a choice, or the choice is made for her through a reflex. Oh, it's so good. It's so cool to see, like, as Mel is changing and takes off the family crest ring and puts it down and votes for peace, moving in the direction she wants to move in, Jinx just quietly sits back down and chooses to stay. I love seeing that parallel. We're all voting for peace begrudgingly, and it's too little too late. That visual of the shark launcher boy thing and how the light, it just emanates all this white and it takes out all the detail in the animation. It's stripping everything bare to hardly any lines, and there's just a little bit of blue. Here's the refined stone. Here's the Powder who can channel energy, and she's channeling it into this weapon, into destruction, and it does that much damage. Peace didn't even last a second. I don't even think they finished counting the 7 votes, but I love seeing that too little too late ties into right as Hextech is being discovered, everything came crumbling down for them. Right as Powder intervened with the monkey boy, they were about to break out. All these near misses of aid, how nobody's absolved, nobody is forgiven. You have protagonists and antagonists in any story. Don't confuse that term with good and bad. You have protagonists in this story that do a lot of harm and antagonists that think they're doing a lot of good. There's something about going through and seeing every character is part of the destruction of this society and the decay of this land. There's something so very human about all of it. It's hard for me to really root for anyone, and I like that about the story. And it really invokes that feeling of me of like, no, use our words, talk it out, work it out. And it kind of reflects on me and how like, yeah, Bill, I know there's a part of my brain that wants to live in Candyland, and if only Hamlet had gotten some therapy, he really could have turned his life around. It's so frustrating. You want so much good to happen, and this show really invokes those feelings in me. And, it's a script. This is a story being told. It's edited. It goes through review and producers and all that crap. It's not real life, but it certainly feels like it. And I think part of this story is not fully rooting for anybody. As you get more pieces of things, it doesn't absolve anybody's decisions, but you start to realize why they did the things they do. I love seeing how much these characters change as you watch it again. I love seeing how somebody with power, somebody with no power can have such a big impact. And I think that's kind of the general theme for me of Arcane, is the impact we have as individuals for the whole, how that can radiate out and impact so much within our lives and then also other people's lives. It's a lot to think about and reflect on, and I really like that element of the story a lot. And the visuals are gorgeous. And it's so pretty. I don't know. I hope these thoughts made sense. I hope you guys liked them. I hope it gave you something to think about, or even just some entertaining background noise. What are you doing while you listen to this video? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts on my thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. Ring the bell, check the settings, set them to all, blah 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 YouTube words. Again, my gaming channel's in the description. I stream there twice a week, Bill Chill Gaming. I also have my merch store there, thethirdbill.com. You can buy some merch or donate to me there. You can also leave a super thanks on this video. And speaking of the description, there's also a link there to a card that will send you to resources for social awareness and education, mental health and crisis lines, Trevor Project resources, things like that, should you or someone you know need them. This video will also be a nice way to test the waters to see if people want additional Arcane or story breakdowny videos like this in the future. So your support does encourage more content. So click the things, share around, follow me on social media, get other people to watch it. I don't know. I'm very insecure and I need to be validated. I hope that my initial reactions were entertaining and fun, going in with no context. And I hope these were kind of fun too, to kind of sit down and take in the story again as a whole, knowing where it's going, seeing the little things that like don't really stick out on first look that kind of resonate more now. I hope to see you next time I upload or go live. Hope everyone's staying safe, wear a mask if you choose to go out, be mindful of others, and remember to take care of yourselves, please.